Hello, and on the bench today we have another, surprise, surprise, Panasonic DVD recorder. This is because the last video I did was a Panasonic DVD recorder, and an engineer friend of mine said, "Oh, I've got one of those. It's got some stuff on that I want saving, but I can't get it up and running." When I say engineer friend, not electronics engineer, so even though he has replaced some capacitors in this. Anyway, this is a DMR EX75. This is a bit newer than the last one we did. The last one didn't have Freeview in it. This has got built-in Freeview. It's a HDMI, but it's not high definition. It upscales a bit. You're going to have to excuse my sniffles in this video. I seem to have the lurgy coming on. This one, though, has got the please wait that seems to hang for a heck of a long time. It's been saying please wait for quite some time. Oh, it's just recognised the hard drive, so we'll switch it on. But it shouldn't say please wait for that amount of time. And now it's going to hang on the hello, on the Lionel Richie stage. It has gone to hard drive mode, which surprised me. I didn't think it would read that. But I think the issue is with reading the RAM assembly. Around about now should be a clunking sound with the RAM coming into life. And it doesn't, and it comes up with an error code. So I've been told, but let's have a look. Yeah, u81. Now some capacitors have been replaced on this, and that didn't cure it. So my chum then gave up and asked me if I could have a look at it. This does want some capacitors replacing, so I'll just check if he's replaced them. But it is the capacitors failing. We should also take out an IC on the main board. And from what I remember, I did one of these a couple of years ago, and you have to take the whole thing to bits. I'm just trying to take the lid off. Because the IC in question, which is failed, is on the underside of the main board. And to get to the main board is tucked away to absolutely, well, it's underneath everything. It looks like a big job, but it isn't. There it is, so bit by bit we're going to have to dismantle this. As I say, it looks a big job, but it isn't really. First of all, front panel we'll need to take off for better access. Then the hard drive and caddy, well, we need to unplug everything and whip that off. Then the digital board and the audio board needs to come out. And then the power supply and the main board. And then it should be empty just about, just leaving the DVD RAM assembly. So then we can have a look at the main board. And there it is. And the issue with this is not on that side, even though I will replace a couple of capacitors in a second. There's capacitor 1530 and 1533 that don't necessarily look bulged. He did have a couple of bulged capacitors on this, and he's taken them and replaced them. Which hasn't changed it. But on the other side of the board is this IC 1508. A little 8-pin chip. And it is a little chip. Looks big on the screen, but it is a little chip. So once again, if you're watching this video, and if you haven't done anything like this before, then just pass it over to a guy that can do. Because if you're not au fait with soldering tiny little ICs, you could cause damage to the track. But the secret is always use a lot of flux. I've got my own flux. I want to say my own. It's not my own brand. I just make it up from some California flux and some isopropyl alcohol, and it makes up a nice flux. Keeps me going for years. I'm just going to tidy up this IC that I've taken off now. Sometimes you can tell from the IC that it's faulty, because it does blow a chunk of it off. But on this occasion it hasn't. The IC actually looked fine, but it is the IC that's causing the u81. That alongside a couple of capacitors, which I'll stick in afterwards. So I'm just tidying these up a bit, a little bit of extra solder so we can plonk in the IC. clean it up and put some fresh solder on. Anyway, we'll stick that IC in, and then we'll have a look at the capacitors. The IC can only go on one way, so make sure that pin 1, which is identified by a little round circle in the top right hand corner, goes on point 1 of the solder. The legs are numbered 1 to 8 actually on the main board, so it's easy enough to get them the wrong way round. I'm not going to bore you with the soldering bits, but that's in place now. In fact, I'm just going to put a little bit more solder on. Looking at it from this angle, I can see that pin 8 can have a little bit more solder. Yes, I'm using thick solder here, only because I'm lazy and I can't be bothered to get the thin stuff out of a cabinet which is less than 2 feet away from me. And I've just got a bit of this left over, so if I do it gently, it'll be fine just to tidy up the bits. And then there's a couple of capacitors, and these capacitors do catch a few people out. Obviously, make sure you observe the polarity of the capacitors, but they are C1530 and C1533 on this board. And I'm putting in a 25 volt capacitor, which is 100 microfarads. I've noticed that the one that was in before was a 35 volt, so I think this has been changed before, this capacitor. Someone's gone a bit higher, but we don't need to go higher. Let's keep it exactly the same. In the Panasonic service manual, it's down as a 25 volt, so we'll stick a 25 volt one back in, and all will be well. As I say, the gentleman before has replaced some capacitors that were bulged. They were not connected to this issue. But all in all, 4 new capacitors and an IC this board has had in the last week. Anyway, we'll just snip those and tidy those up, and then we'll put it all back together. I'll stick the hard drive in. You don't need to see you don't need to see me doing that. All back in. Let's plug it in and see what happens. The please wait thing shouldn't be so long this time. It should clunk into action pretty quickly. Well, definitely not as long as a minute. In fact, there it is. That's the hard drive. I'll just go and fetch a remote control. I've got one down here. Turn it on. Hello. So it didn't take so long this time to get it up and running. We're just hoping now that because that a new IC is fitted with the new capacitors, it can read the RAM assembly and it'll believe that everything is okay. And it should, I'm not too sure what it does. It may go to the clock, or it may just go, it's either going to go to the clock, or it's going to tell us what's left on the hard drive. I don't know if you heard it then, it just clunked. So that's good. That's the RAM assembly back in operation, and there it is. With 133 hours left on the hard drive. Channel 901. That's good. I'll just flick through these. You don't have to see me do that. I can, I'll just switch it off and say goodbye. There it is. Goodbye. That's how you do a DMR EX75. Thanks very much for watching. If we can help you with anything, here's a telephone number.